Good morning, class. In the previous lesson, we have learned about pollination, that it is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, or transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower. And over here, we have a helping hand, that is the bee, is acting as a pollinator. So this bee helps to transfer the pollens from one flower to the another flower. So pollination occurs when pollen grains from the male part of one flower are transferred to the female part of another flower. Types of pollination: self-pollination and cross-pollination. We have also learned about role of pollination. That is, plants can produce offspring is by making seeds, as you can see in this video. Now today we'll be learning about self-pollination and cross-pollination. So over here, the transfer of pollen grains from one part to the female part of a flower. And we have the helping hand, that is the pollinator, that is the bee. So let us understand the first part of the type, self-pollination. Self-pollination occurs when the pollen from the anther is deposited to the stigma of the same flower or another flower on the same plant. The transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower is self-pollination. Next now, cross-pollination. It refers to a complex type of pollination that allows the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of the flower into the stigma of another flower. So the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower, that is cross-pollination. So class, this is all we'll be learning for today. We have learned about types of pollination. First one is self-pollination, that is transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, that is self-pollination. Next now, the transfer of pollen grains with the help of pollinator to the female part of another flower, that is cross-pollination. So class, this is all we'll be learning for today.